So I'm going to talk about pin making. I've got a completely different take. A hobby that I picked up probably now about 25 years ago. I needed something that wasn't tech. I was too deep in tech, right? My job, my hobbies, my life, my everything was tech, and it was starting to get onto me. I wanted to get into woodworking because I was always enamored by it, and my neighbor was a pin turner. So you take wood, take some pin mechanics, you turn the wood into a shape to fit the pin mechanics, and now you have something that's usable, something that doesn't take weekends and years to make, like cabinets and furniture, and at least that's how long it would take me. So I got into this pin making. And the really cool thing about pin making is that you can find woods from all over the world that when you get into them, they're just absolutely beautiful, and some are just like plain vanilla boring. So one of the really cool things in business that I've had the fortunate capability is doing a lot of traveling around the world. I try to pick up wood when I go places that's endemic. Now, sometimes it's actually difficult to get it back in to the U.S., but because it's dead, it's easier. Live stuff is the hard part. So the other thing that came about in this hobby was I had seen a movie in the mid-90s of a foot-powered lathe, and it's actually called a velocipede, basically from a bicycle, all right? There had been treadle lathes. Basically, it's a 1-foot pump, all right? But this is a sit down and turn. These are hard to find. These are mid to late 1800s manufactured. They stopped manufacturing in the early 1910s, I believe. I finally found, actually I wanted this in 1999. I wanted my Y2K compliant lathe because power was going to go, right? We're going to go back to the dark ages. I was going to keep making my pins, all right? That was my dream, I guess you could call it. I didn't get to achieve the dream until 2001. I found this guy that would buy these things and restore them. And the more even interesting thing about pedaling on the lathe is when we think of pedal on a bike, you typically, one of your foot goes, I'll call it forward, and then you're pedaling effectively in a kind of forward mode. On the lathe, you've got to pedal backwards because you have to turn the wood against you. So when you put the tool against it to carve it, it carves. Ask me how I know that you have to do it backwards, right? I'm trying to turn and there's no chips flying. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. A lathe. Anyway, so it turns out that this manufacturer had a number of different tools. And this is one where I was turning on the lathe, and there's a pin jig, okay, not one of these, but of up in the upper left there, of the blank on the lathe that I actually did turn. It's a lot of work when you're not in decent shape. That was my other thinking. Oh, I'll get these foot-powered tools. I'll get in better shape. Yeah, that's like going to the gym, buying the memberships, buying the gear at home, blah, blah, blah. I'm not that good at it. Anyway, I picked up a few more tools along in my journey. The other one in the lower right's a scroll saw. So now I've got a way to cut my wood, and I've got a way to turn my wood. Didn't have a way to drill a hole. You got to drill a hole through the wood, right? But anyway, I think that's my last picture. Yes, it is. So I have, in addition to these tools, a treadle table saw, but it also has a side crank. I don't have free labor at home, so I have to do the treadle, all right? But if you're working on a big project, you can get somebody to help you, and so somebody can turn while you feed if you're doing big wood. And I also have a foot-powered pedal. It's like a router. They call it a former, all right? But you put a bit in it. Instead of moving like a router where you put it against the wood to make a trim, you feed the wood into it while you're pedaling it. And in all these tools, the one thing that the gentleman that was buying these and refurbishing, they always found that out in Granddad's barn, they would find the tool, but they would never find the bits and the pieces and the small stuff because they were over in the cabinets at the tool shop, right? Not near the machine. So he had gotten to the point of getting a lot of things manufactured, but to the old spec. So anyway, no, I don't turn most of my pins on these because it's just too much work, but it is fun to every so often go out and do it. And that's my completely non-tech hobby.